In a faraway village called Dakanka, there lived a man named Nkosi. Nkosi was not like the other villagers. He had the biggest house anyone had ever seen. His house was so big, it looked like it could touch the sky. Nkosi also had the most beautiful horse. A horse so strong and shiny that everyone in the village would stop and stare whenever he rode by. But there was something else about Nkosi. He was very rich, even richer than the king. He had more money than anyone in the village. The villagers would whisper to each other, "Look, there goes Nkosi, the richest man in all of the Kanka." Nkosi loved it when people talked about him. He liked it when they stared and pointed, saying, "Wow, look at his big house. Look at his fine clothes. Look at his beautiful horse." But Nkosi was not just rich, he was also very proud. He wanted everyone to bow to him when he walked by. He wanted people to treat him like he was a king. "Everyone must bow to me," Nkosi would say to himself. And so, Nkosi walked through the village with his head held high, enjoying the way people looked at him, talked about him, and even feared him. But there was something Nkosi didn't know. Being rich and proud doesn't always bring happiness, and soon Nkosi would learn this in a way he never expected. Nkosi was not just rich, he loved getting married too. In fact, Nkosi got married almost every week. He would walk through the village looking for the prettiest girls, and when he saw one he liked, he would say, "That one will be my wife." At first, Nkosi did things the right way. He would pay for the weddings, just like everyone else. He would give gifts to the girl's family, and there would be a big feast with lots of food. The villagers would come, and there would be dancing and singing. Everyone would say, "Nkosi is so rich and generous. Look how well he takes care of his wives." But after a while, Nkosi thought, "Why should I pay for these weddings? I am richer than anyone here. I don't need to pay for anything." So, Nkosi stopped giving gifts. He stopped having big feasts. Instead, when he saw a girl he wanted to marry, he would just take her without asking. "Come with me," he would say, and the girl had no choice but to follow him. The villagers were scared of Nkosi. They knew he was powerful and rich, and they were afraid to say no to him. They didn't want to lose their daughters, but they didn't know what to do. "What can we do?" they whispered to each other. "Nkosi is too strong, too rich. We cannot stop him." So, Nkosi continued to take as many wives as he wanted, without paying, without asking, and without caring about how the villagers felt. And with each new wife, Nkosi's pride grew bigger and bigger. But deep down, the villagers began to resent him, and the seeds of trouble were quietly being planted. The people of Dakanka were not like Nkosi. They were poor and struggled to make ends meet. Sometimes they needed help, maybe some money to buy food or to fix their roofs when the rains came. And so they would go to Nkosi because everyone knew he had more money than anyone else in the village. But Nkosi was not kind. When the villagers came to him for help, he would say, "I will help you, but only if you give me something in return." And what Nkosi wanted was not money or crops. He wanted their wives or their daughters. "If you want my help, give me your daughter," Nkosi would say. "If you can't pay me back, then your wife will do." The villagers were heartbroken. They loved their families, but they had no choice. They were too poor to refuse, and Nkosi was too powerful to argue with. Even the king, who was supposed to protect the people, could do nothing. When the villagers went to him, begging for help, the king would shake his head sadly and say, "Nkosi is too powerful. I cannot stop him." The king was afraid of Nkosi. just like everyone else. And so the villagers were trapped. They needed help, but the price was too high. They watched as Nkosi took their daughters and their wives, feeling helpless and sad. Their hearts were heavy, but there was nothing they could do. Nkosi's greed and pride were growing, and the villagers' pain grew with it. But deep inside, the villagers wished that one day something or someone would come to change things. They wished for a time when they wouldn't have to live in fear of losing their loved ones to the greedy, arrogant Nkosi. They didn't know how or when, but they hoped and prayed that change would come. One sunny day, Nkosi was riding his beautiful horse through the village, as he often did. As he passed by, he noticed a girl named Ama. Ama was very beautiful, with bright eyes and a kind heart. But there was something different about Ama. She didn't look at Nkosi the way other girls did. Instead of admiring him, Ama stared at Nkosi with disgust. She did not like him at all. Ama was the daughter of Chika, the king's right-hand man and the head of the village warriors. She was strong, brave, and not afraid to show how she felt. When Nkosi saw the way Ama looked at him, he felt angry, but also determined. How dare she look at me like that? Nkosi thought. I will make her my wife, and then she will learn to respect me. Without wasting any time, Nkosi decided to take Ama as his wife. He didn't care that Ama's father was an important man, or that Ama didn't want to marry him. Nkosi was used to getting whatever he wanted, and he wanted Ama. Nkosi called his guards and said, "Go to Chika's house and bring me Ama. She will be my wife before the sun sets." The guards did as they were told. They marched to Chika's house, and without greeting anyone, they took Ama away. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't explain why. They just grabbed her and left. Ama struggled and tried to fight back, but the guards were too strong. They dragged her to Nkosi's mansion, where Nkosi was waiting, smiling with pride. "Now you will be my wife," Nkosi said, thinking he had won. But Ama was not like the other girls Nkosi had taken. She was brave and strong-willed. Even though she was scared, she didn't bow to Nkosi. Instead, she looked him in the eye and said, "You may take me to your house, but you will never have my heart." Nkosi laughed at Ama's words, thinking they meant nothing. But Ama's bravery was the start of something that would soon change everything in Dakanka. For the first time, someone had stood up to Nkosi, and the winds of change were beginning to blow. When Chika, Ama's father, heard what had happened, his heart filled with anger. His only daughter had been taken away by Nkosi, the arrogant rich man who thought he could do anything he wanted. Chika loved Ama dearly, and he couldn't stand the thought of her being forced to marry Nkosi. Chika went straight to the king. He was the king's right-hand man, and he believed the king would help him. "Your Majesty," Chika said, "Nkosi has taken my daughter Ama without my permission. This is not right. You must stop him." The king sighed deeply and shook his head. "Chika, my friend," the king said, "I understand your pain, but Nkosi is too powerful. He has more money than I do, and his men are many and strong. I cannot stop him. If I try, he might turn against me, and then what will become of our village?" Chika was furious. The king's words felt like a betrayal. How could the king, who was supposed to protect the people, be so afraid of Nkosi? But Chika knew he couldn't rely on the king. He would have to take matters into his own hands. Without wasting any time, Chika gathered some of the bravest warriors in the village. "We will go to Nkosi's house and bring Ama back," Chika told them. The warriors agreed, for they too were tired of Nkosi's arrogance and cruelty. That night, Chika and his warriors set out for Nkosi's mansion. They were determined to fight and free Ama. When they arrived, they found Nkosi's men guarding the gates. Chika and his warriors drew their weapons, ready for battle. The fight was fierce, but Nkosi's men were many and well armed. They were used to defending Nkosi's mansion, and they fought hard. Chika and his warriors were brave, but they were outnumbered. One by one, they were defeated. Chika himself fought with all his might, but in the end, he was overpowered. Nkosi's men captured him and the remaining warriors and threw them out of the mansion. "Go back to your village and tell them that Nkosi cannot be beaten," the guard said. Chika returned home, wounded and heartbroken. He had tried to save his daughter, but Nkosi's power was too great. The villagers heard what had happened and felt even more hopeless. If Chika, the king's right-hand man, couldn't stop Nkosi, then who could? But deep inside, Chika vowed that he would not give up. Ama was his daughter, and he would find a way to save her, no matter what. The struggle was not over yet. After the fight between Chika and Nkosi's men, the whole village of Dakanka was filled with fear. The villagers had always known that Nkosi was powerful, but now they saw just how strong and ruthless he could be. If Chika, the brave warrior and the king's right-hand man, could not defeat Nkosi, what hope did anyone else have? The villagers were terrified. They knew that Nkosi could take any woman he wanted, and there was nothing they could do to stop him. Mothers began to hide their daughters. Whenever Nkosi was near, fathers would keep their wives inside, away from Nkosi's gaze. The village, once full of laughter and life, became quiet and tense. People were afraid to even walk outside. But despite their fear, the villagers were still poor. They needed money to buy food, to fix their homes, and to take care of their families. And the only person in the village with enough money to help was Nkosi. So, even though they knew it might cost them dearly, they continued to go to Nkosi for loans. When they borrowed money from Nkosi, they did so with heavy hearts. They knew that if they couldn't pay him back, Nkosi would demand something much more precious, their wives or daughters. But what choice did they have? They needed to survive, and Nkosi was their only hope. So, the villagers lived in constant fear. They were trapped, needing Nkosi's money, but dreading the price they might have to pay. Every time they saw Nkosi riding through the village on his beautiful horse, their hearts would race with anxiety. Would he notice their daughter? Would he demand their wife next? Nkosi, meanwhile, continued to grow richer and more arrogant. He enjoyed the power he held over the villagers, never once thinking about the pain he was causing. To him, the villagers were just people to control, to take from, and to make himself feel even more important. But beneath the surface, the villagers' fear was slowly turning into something else: anger. They were tired of living in fear, tired of watching their loved ones taken away. And though they were still too scared to act, the seeds of rebellion were being planted deep in their hearts. One bright morning, Nkosi woke up feeling as proud as ever. He stretched in his big, luxurious bed and thought about what new riches he would enjoy that day. But when he stepped outside his grand mansion, he was met with a sight that made his heart skip a beat. Standing in front of his house was a man he never expected to see again: Chief Coco. Chief Coco was a tall, strong man with wise eyes. He stood calmly, looking at Nkosi with a knowing smile. Nkosi felt a sudden rush of fear. He knew Chief Coco well, too well. Before Nkosi became the rich, powerful man everyone feared, he had been a simple servant, and Chief Koko had been his master. Seeing his old master again brought back memories Nkosi had tried to forget. Memories of when he was poor and humble, of when he had to work hard for everything he had. But Nkosi wasn't that man anymore. He was rich, powerful, and feared by everyone, or so he thought. But now, with Chief Koko standing before him, all of Nkosi's arrogance seemed to shrink. He remembered how kind and fair Chief Koko had been, and how he had betrayed him long ago. The sight of Chief Koko filled Nkosi with dread. Why is he here? Nkosi wondered, his mind racing. What does he want? Nkosi tried to compose himself, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. Chief Koko's presence was a reminder of the man Nkosi used to be, and it was clear that his past had come back to haunt him. Chief Koko looked at Nkosi calmly, but there was a firmness in his gaze that made Nkosi uneasy. Nkosi, Chief Koko said, his voice strong and clear. It's time to talk. Nkosi knew then that his days of arrogance might soon come to an end. Chief Koko was not a man to be taken lightly, and if he was here, it meant that something was about to change. Nkosi's heart pounded as he realized that his past was catching up with him, and he might not be able to escape the consequences of his actions any longer. Chief Koko walked up to Nkosi with a stern expression on his face. He looked deep into Nkosi's eyes and asked, "Do you remember me, Nkosi?" Nkosi's mouth went dry, and he nodded, trembling. How could he forget? This was the man who had once been his master, the man who had treated him with kindness, only for Nkosi to betray him. Now, seeing Chief Koko again, Nkosi felt small, like the servant he used to be, not the powerful man he had become. As the villagers noticed the scene unfolding in front of Nkosi's mansion, they began to gather around, curious about the stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. They had never seen Nkosi look so afraid before. Whispers spread through the crowd as they tried to figure out what was happening. "Who is this man?" they murmured. "Why is Nkosi so scared?" Chief Koko turned to face the crowd, his voice steady and strong. "Let me tell you a story about Nkosi and me," he began. The villagers fell silent, eager to hear what the stranger had to say. Chief Koko continued, "Many years ago, Nkosi was not the rich man you see today. He was my servant. We traveled together, and I treated him like a son. But one day, while we were on a journey, something terrible happened." Nkosi's heart sank as Chief Koko spoke. He knew what was coming and he wished he could stop it. But there was no stopping Chief Koko now. The truth was about to be revealed. Nkosi stood there, surrounded by the villagers who had once feared him, with Chief Koko's words still echoing in his ears. He knew there was no escape from the truth. The weight of his guilt was too heavy to bear, and he could feel the anger of the villagers rising around him. There was no way out but to confess. With a trembling voice, Nkosi began to speak. "Yes, it's true," he admitted. "Once, many years ago, Chief Koko and I were traveling together. He was my master, and I was his servant. I looked up to him, and he treated me well, like a son. But then, one day, something terrible happened." The villagers leaned in closer, their eyes wide with shock and disbelief. They had never imagined that Nkosi, the rich and powerful man they knew, had such a dark past. Nkosi continued, "We were on a journey, and it began to rain heavily. The path we were walking on became slippery and dangerous. As we made our way along the path, Chief Koko slipped and fell. He was badly injured, and he couldn't move. I was scared, terrified even. I didn't know what to do. Nkosi paused, his voice breaking with emotion. Instead of helping him, instead of doing what was right, I let my fear take over. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. I took all of Chief Coco's money and left him there, alone and helpless. I left him to die. The villagers gasped, their hearts heavy with the weight of Nkosi's betrayal. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. The man they had once admired, even if out of fear, had built his entire life on such a terrible act of treachery. Nkosi continued, tears now streaming down his face. I ran away as far as I could. I used the money I stole to start a new life here, in this village. With that money, I became rich and powerful. I built my mansion, I married many wives, and I made people fear and respect me. But all of it, all of my wealth, all of my power, was built on a lie. A lie that began with my betrayal of the man who trusted me the most. The villagers were silent, their minds reeling from the truth they had just heard. They had always known Nkosi as a proud and arrogant man, but they had never known the terrible secret that lay at the foundation of his success. Chief Coco stood silently, his eyes fixed on Nkosi. He had waited a long time for this moment, and now that the truth was out, there was no going back. The villagers turned to Chief Coco, waiting to see what he would do next. Nkosi fell to his knees, overcome with guilt and shame.
"I'm sorry,"
he whispered, his voice choked with tears.
"I'm so sorry for what I've done."
But the villagers, who had once bowed to Nkosi in fear, now looked at him with a mixture of anger and pity. They knew that the time for Nkosi's reckoning had come, and they were ready to see justice done. The man who had once controlled their lives was now at their mercy, and the power he had once wielded was gone. Chief Coco nodded solemnly as Nkosi finished his confession. The villagers stood in silence, absorbing the weight of the story they had just heard. The truth was finally out, and it was more terrible than they had ever imagined. I survived that day because a kind old woman helped me, Chief Coco said, his voice steady but filled with the memory of his past suffering. She found me lying there, broken and alone, and she took care of me. But I never forgot what Nkosi did. I waited all these years, hoping that maybe he would change, that he would become a better man. But instead, he grew more arrogant and cruel, taking from others just as he had taken from me. The king, who had been listening intently, looked troubled. He turned to the elders, who nodded in agreement. They all realized that Nkosi's wealth and power had not been earned through hard work or honesty, but through dishonesty and betrayal. The king knew that justice had to be done, not just for Chief Coco, but for all the villagers who had suffered because of Nkosi's arrogance. With a heavy heart, the king stood and addressed the crowd. Nkosi's wealth and power were built on lies and cruelty, he declared. He has taken what did not belong to him, and he has hurt many people along the way. Today, that ends. The king ordered that Nkosi be stripped of all his wealth and power. Everything he owned, including his grand mansion, his beautiful horse, and all his riches, were taken away. Chief Coco's belongings, which had been stolen from him so long ago, were returned to their rightful owner. The villagers watched as Nkosi, once so proud and powerful, was left with nothing. Nkosi's wives and children were filled with shame. They had once lived in luxury, but now they had nowhere to go. The women who had left their husbands to be with Nkosi felt too embarrassed to return to their families. They realized too late that they had been deceived by Nkosi's wealth and had lost everything because of it. The villagers, who had once feared and Nkosi now felt a sense of justice and relief. They had learned a powerful lesson. Arrogance and cruelty would only lead to downfall. And Nkosi, who had once had everything, was now alone and destitute, a man who had lost it all because of his wicked ways. And so, the story of Nkosi became a tale told for generations in the Kanka village. It was a story that reminded everyone, young and old, that true wealth does not come from riches or power. True wealth comes from kindness, humility, and treating others with respect. The villagers of the Kanka never forgot the lesson they learned from Nkosi's downfall, and they passed it on to their children, ensuring that the tale of the arrogant man who married 1,000 wives would never be forgotten. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one. Thank you.